My name is Eleni Pappas. I'm a co-chair of the Culinary Advisory Council and proud volunteer for the Nourishing Literacy Program here at the Culinary Literacy Center. This program reaches 5,000 Philadelphia school kids within the past year. They come and learn to cook in our kitchen. Tonight's event is the Julie Dannenbaum Memorial Culinary Arts Lecture, established in honor of Julie Dannenbaum, the beloved chef, cooking teacher, and food writer who, across many decades of dedicated work, brought her joy and enthusiasm for food to countless Philadelphians and to the Free Library. As many of you know, the Free Library is dedicated to advancing literacy, guiding learning, and inspiring curiosity, from its award-winning author event series to its thought-provoking programs, such as the Culinary Literacy Center's Edible Alphabet, a unique teaching model that combines English language literacy instruction with hands-on experiential learning through cooking. Please consider making a gift that will help the library continue to produce such transformative programming. This evening, it's my great pleasure to introduce Sean Brock, a food pioneer who's changing the way the world thinks about the cuisine of the southern United States. The founding chef of the Husk restaurant group and chef of McCradys in Charleston for 12 years, he's now the chef-owner of Audrey and Redbird, opening next year in Nashville. Brock won the James Beard Award for Best American Cookbook and the IACP Julia Child First Book Award for Heritage, his 2014 bestseller, and was nominated for an Emmy Award for his work on the television show The Mind of a Chef. His new cookbook, South, was an instant New York Times bestseller. Kim Severson recently praised him in that same publication, writing that no one cooking today is doing more to help the Southern culinary flame burn brighter. He'll be joined in conversation by the library's very own Jason Freeman, producer and editor here by the Author Events series. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sean Brock and Jason Freeman to the Free Library.
Howdy. So, I just discovered we're both 41, and more importantly, we're both Appalachians. And you had a saying somehow that has escaped me in my years. If people say Appalachia,
I'm going to throw in Appalachia.
All right.
That's such a grandpa thing to say. I love it.
I love it. Okay. So now that we've gotten the fun out of the way. So in an interview 2 years ago, you were being asked about the title of this book. You threw out a few possibilities, my favorite being Southern food is the best food in the world. And you apparently got rid of everything but the first syllable. And I like the other title more, so I'm going with it. So as your personal truth, I like to start with the big questions here. Why is Southern food the best food in the world?
Well, I think for each of us, our food, whatever our food is and wherever we're from, that should be the best food in the world. I think the power of pride, especially when it comes to community and your home, food has such a big part of that, and I think it's just so important.
Cool. I like to start at the beginning, origin stories, that kind of thing, and there are references to it in the book. Your grandmother, Audrey, a name we'll come back to later, but I'd like a little more information. What was eating like growing up in the city of Pound, Virginia, there on the Virginia-Kentucky border when you were a kid?
So, has anyone heard of Pound, Virginia? No one? Not a single person. Which makes sense because I think the population today it's less than 1,000 people. And what that means for food is there are no restaurants, there's no convenient food. So you grow and you hunt, and if you're eating it, you had something to do with producing it. And I grew up in a pretty rural area with a grandmother who had grown up the same way, and the generations before her, putting seeds in the ground, taking care of those plants, harvesting them, preserving them, cooking them, sharing them. and I was born into that. And as a little kid, most of my memories have food involved some way. I mean, most of my childhood memories are around food, and I just fell in love at a very, very young age, because if you weren't in the garden, you were in the kitchen, you were in the basement preserving. It was just such a huge part of life. If we were watching TV, we were shelling beans. It was just always touching food.
Cool. You point out in the book's foreword that the American South is about the size of continental Europe, which I don't think a lot of people think about. And I've heard you and Anthony Bourdain famously say, famous to me anyhow, a version of this: the South isn't a monolith. And I think a lot of people, I'm not going to blame any Philadelphians for that, but some people, especially I think in the North, would sort of see it in that way. There's so many recipes, so many little specific, this is an Augusta thing, this is a Charleston thing, all these twists on ways of making things. How challenging does it make it then to make a cookbook called South?
Well, it makes it so exciting, and it makes it easy to continue writing books, because there's so much to explore, and there's still so much to discover. The South is, if you turn to page 11, I think, is it 11?
Let's find out. I have a galley here. So.
Yes. Look at that. That is just crazy. This is almost like taking the South and separating it and viewing it as its own country. If this were its own country, and you see it beside that part of Europe, you would think that there would be more than a singular cuisine that exists there. And I think once I started looking at it this way, and once I had the great fortune of traveling to different places in the world to eat and study food and to cook Southern food for people, I started to realize, how misunderstood Southern food is, mostly outside of America. I think America's really starting to understand the complexities of the South and Southern food. But it just made me start to realize that we're such a young country. We're infants. And if you look at these culinary traditions of those places, they have hundreds of years on us. And so, to me, what that says is, yes, as far as America goes, we have a deep history to be inspired by. But what excites me the most is what's possible from here forward. I think there's so many traditions that haven't even been dreamt up yet that will become Southern traditions. Think about it this way. How old was Modena when they decided to start making balsamic vinegar as something really, really serious? I would love to know that answer if somebody has Google handy. But, food is just such an ever-evolving thing, and cuisine is such an ever-evolving thing. And in order to track that, in order to be inspired by that, in order to try and contribute to that, you got to understand what makes a cuisine and how cuisine becomes a cuisine. And I believe that, based on my research and my obsessiveness, what I've seen, there's a few common factors. It's the people, the place, and the ingredients that came from those people and thrive in that place. And so if you go to each little region and you look at, in the South, the Native Americans, which tribe of Native Americans were there first, and then if you look at the demographics and see all the people who immigrated there, then you start to see the cultural exchange that occurs between this melting pot, and the cuisine naturally takes shape. I think that's just so fascinating. The geography has so much to do with it, because those ingredients have to be able to thrive in that area. And so they just kind of fall together onto the plate and into the pot. And if that's the case, if that's how it actually comes to be, then what does that mean for Southern food today? What does that mean for food here today? You know, if the food of a place happens because of those reasons, wow, we have so much to learn, so much to look forward to.
Speaking of learning, I hadn't really thought about it until you just said that. Is this field research you do? Is this going to county courthouses and finding, historical records, book reading, sleuthing?
I've discovered that the most useful information isn't on Google, which that's even crazy to think about. But my biggest discoveries have been through agricultural journals, and I mean, look where we're sitting. This is a perfect example. You have to go past Google. And the easiest, best way to do that is to go to the universities and the community colleges and find professors who are interested in food and interested in the history of a place, because they have access to so much more. But also, what I've found is, let's say that I'm very interested in a tradition somewhere in the South. I can go to a professor, and then they can assign that to the class. And there's all of a sudden a room full of people doing this research. And to truly find the things that make a huge difference, I think that's a fun way to go about it.
That's awesome. There's a book just in that, I'm sure. I'm sure you guys, when you came in, started flipping through the book. And I just talking about the structure of it for a few minutes, I love it because it's very top to bottom. I love the way it's portioned out. I love the introduction as kind of a manifesto in a certain way. And, there are 5 cornbread recipes, and, that kind of thing. But also, there's a lot here on methodology. Grilling, smoking, taking care of cast iron, pickling, pantry. Obviously, it's important to you to put it in there as these sections. I guess I want to focus on the pantry. How long do you think I kind of like the practical questions. How long do you think it's going to take somebody to, kind of put up this kind of pantry to be able to do this stuff? Are they going to be able to find the sorts of ingredients around here, for example?
So in the first book I wrote, he or she who dies with the biggest pantry wins. And that's the first thing we do when we open a restaurant, or we start to even conceptualize a restaurant, is we understand the importance of the pantry. And I saw that at a very young age, running around my grandmother's basement and in her smokehouse, and seeing her constantly pulling from these things year-round. And what the pantry allows is for layers and complexity to exist within a recipe. But it's also a really amazing way to be responsible and cook responsibly and to not waste anything. And so now, these recipes are recipes that started out as stuff from my grandmother, stuff from my mom, stuff from other chefs, research, and then I kind of made them my own. And if you look at all the great pickling recipes and vinegar recipes and the fermentations, it's a simple idea, but where it gets fun, where it gets really unique, is where you ask yourself, what does this place taste like, where I live and where I cook? And how can I use this pantry to make these classic dishes and these traditions just a tiny bit better? And so now we're going into it with a full research and development kitchen with the craziest, most insane scientific equipment you could ever possibly imagine. I don't know what my grandmother would say about that, how she would feel about me using CO2 extraction or freeze dryers or sonicators and rotary evaporators. But to me, it's like, if you can take a classic dish, something that my grandmother taught me, then I can say, let's break it apart. Let's break chicken dumplings apart, and let's say that it's flour, it's a flour dumpling, it's a broth, and it's chicken. Then how can we take each of those components, all the ingredients that are in the dumpling, look at the broth and look at the chicken and ask the question, how can we make this better? How can we amplify it? How can we keep pushing it to be even more delicious? And we can do that using modern technology. And then what happens is you're serving the same dish, but when someone tastes it, you hopefully exceed their expectations. And guess what? Now you have their attention again. And now they want to know more. And that keeps the story alive. That keeps the narrative alive. Now I can start talking about my grandmother's technique for dumplings.
My other favorite part in here was resources. And I'm sure it's been in other cookbooks, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe not. But it's, if there's a certain kind of molasses, certain kinds of, red Jimmy corn, all this. There is a section at the end of the book, website. I went down a real internet hole with this, looking at all these purveyors of these products. And I know this is a pretty recent publication date, but have you heard a response from any of these folks after this book has come out, or just since you've become such a fan and started singing their praises?
Yeah, I didn't tell any of these people I was putting them in the book, so I'm getting a lot of text messages like, "Whoa, I was wondering why." The orders went crazy, and now, and in the age of social media, to go on and see people tagging these people like Anson Mills or Lindera Farms Vinegars and these different sorghum makers, see people making these dishes with those ingredients. Wow, what just an amazing gift that I've been given to be able to spread the gospel of this unique, beautiful cuisine and involve these people who are responsible for creating these unique, amazing ingredients that honor tradition and keep tradition alive.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. And I like that you took this very local thing, and as you guys probably know, this book jumped onto the bestseller list, so it's got to be an awesome signal boost for those people. When it comes to growing things yourself, to looking for what's in your area, speaking of this kind of stuff, you said something really interesting that seemed kind of paradoxical, but I thought it was fascinating. It was by limiting yourself to what's just in your area, in a fashion it ultimately makes you more creative and more versatile, not limited in your cooking. Can you talk about that for a second?
So when I created the idea of Husk, I knew it was opening up, a Pandora's box, but I also knew that I only had guests for a limited amount of time when they're at the table. And I wanted that conversation to be about the producers and the traditions of this cuisine. And so I made the decision to not use ingredients from Italy or from France or anywhere else, because if I'm making a recipe with southern ingredients that are just harvested from a farm down the road, but I dress it in balsamic vinegar, you might start thinking about Italy. You might think about how much you love balsamic vinegar. And so what that forced us to do is say, well, why can't we take muscadine grapes that I grew up with and turn those into balsamic vinegar? Well, now we can't use olive oil. What are we going to do? So we buy an oil press and we start making acorn oil and hickory nut oil. And I think that's how those ingredients started in those places, because they're what's available, they're what's within arm's reach. And I think that's the true flavor of that place. And I don't think you have to go as crazy as I do, but I think those things I would have probably never cooked with acorn oil, or I would have never planted olive trees to make olive oil if I hadn't pushed myself to do that.
That's so cool. And thinking about community, and I was, it's a tough question, I think. You said in an interview what you liked about living in Charleston, you're in Nashville now, is how cuisines and cultures interact and shape each other. And, you know, I was thinking we live in, to put it mildly, a contentious moment. And I think sometimes the South is seen as an epicenter of sort of a divisive era in politics. And without talking about any of that, do you think that food has this larger power and not just kind of around the table? Have you seen food where you grow up, where you're living now, help bridge these divides and, you know, experience firsthand this a larger coming together?
So food allows us to be comfortable. And food allows us to feel good. Food allows us to feel safe. And we have to have that if we want to have difficult conversations. And if we want to open up those dialogues. You know, food is like the common thread. It's the common language that we all speak because we crave it. We need that comfort. We're wired to reach for that. And when you're in a place and someone's cooking you food from their heart, from their place, you immediately want to know more about them and about that place. And I've learned personally, I've learned so much about the rest of the world. I've learned so much about the history of the South by being curious about ingredients and traditional dishes. And I think that can hold true for everyone. It's like it's a way to start the conversation and make it easier.
Thank you. So also in an interview, you talked about a chef's relationships with the guest in a restaurant and how you can be very disconnected from that when you're back in the kitchen. And I imagine you're on the road a lot these days. And I know you, again, you live in Nashville. How do you sort of keep that relationship between, you know, your art and the people who are consuming it? I mean, are you getting feedback from people on the road, emails, that kind of stuff?
Well, the restaurant I'm creating now has only open kitchens. And I think that's just so important. And the kitchens don't feel like kitchens. They don't have like a bunch of commercial equipment and a bunch of stainless steel. It's a kitchen designed to feel like you're coming to someone's house. And, you know, I absolutely love it when people feel comfortable enough to walk up into the kitchen and up to the pass and ask questions and tell stories and share stories. I mean, we chefs, we're like in a submarine back there, you know. It's like we're so detached from that, and it also helps make the food better because you get an honest eye-to-eye, person-to-person, you know, criticisms and opinions and just thoughts. I love it.
Can you talk about this restaurant a little bit more? The name, the concept.
So, wow, this thing has gotten out of hand. It has gotten so out of hand. So I made the decision. I found myself overseeing and operating 8 restaurants in 5 different cities. And while that's an amazing opportunity, I started to feel like I was spread so thin that I wasn't able to contribute to each place the way I truly knew I could and should and wanted to. And that was just a terrible, terrible feeling. It adds on to the stresses of traveling that much and juggling that much, that shame and guilt that comes along with, you know, feeling like you're not giving your team what they deserve. And so I made the crazy decision to walk away and to start with a blank piece of paper, and I took a pencil and I started drawing the one restaurant that I wanted to spend all my time in and serve my last meal in. Several $1 million later,
So
I
rock and
hope
roll.
people come to it.
What's the focus of the food?
So I'm just at a point in my life where I'm so focused on the present moment. I'm so nervous about future tripping. And I'm so nervous about living in the past that I have no idea what we're going to serve.
I love it.
I have no clue.
That's even more rock and roll.
Because I just want it to naturally happen. I know what our core values are. I know what we're trying to achieve. I know we want to focus on Appalachia. But the restaurant will turn into whatever it turns into. And I think it'll be a better restaurant if I allow that to happen naturally.
Well, as a West Virginian who loves pepperoni rolls, ramps, and fried bologna, I can't wait to see what it is. I have
Has
one
anyone
last.
had a pepperoni roll?
It is a, thank you very much. It is a northern West Virginia delicacy, so the next time you're through the area. I have one last question before we throw it, you think I'm kidding, before we throw it to the audience, and it dovetails a lot of things that I like about your work and concepts of everything. And oddly enough, it's my favorite episode of Parts Unknown, the one where Anthony Bourdain goes to Charleston, and you guys go to Waffle House, and there is a dinner at Husk with my 3 dream Husk co-diners, you, Bill Murray, and Bourdain. And it was really first when you came on my radar, and I was like, oh, cool, somebody from the South is making us look good for once. And I guess my question is, maybe a big one, maybe not. Can you share something about hanging with Anthony Bourdain, a skill he taught you, something you guys went and did that really sticks out in your mind?
So I got some great Bourdain stories. Some of them are on national television. And some of them, I'm glad they're on national television because I wouldn't have remembered them. Especially the Waffle House episode. So Tony had come to Charleston to film his first episode of, I guess it was No Reservations, or no, it was Cook's Tour. Maybe one of the two. It was probably No Reservations. Anyway, he found this pub, this dive bar that I went to every night called Big John's Tavern. Amazing. It's gone now. But he would hang with us till 3 o'clock in the morning every night. And I remember one time he almost had to be carried out of there. And so fast forward, maybe, almost 10 years, he invited me to come to Japan to film an episode with him. And I remember how nervous I was about, I had all this time on the plane in Japan to think about it, and I was just getting so nervous. And when I met him, he was the biggest dork, the biggest geek, like the nicest, most humble, genuine person that I couldn't believe it. Honestly, could not believe how much of a geek he was. Because he really plays it off on TV when you're watching it. But he was such a curious person. And that curiosity led him to see the world through the lens of food, and to show people that food is the great equalizer, and it makes it so much easier to, like, he taught us that you shouldn't be scared to go to this place, or you shouldn't be scared to have a conversation with people. Food allows us to do that, and if you're chasing food and you sit down, you can learn so much about a place. He taught me that on that trip to Japan. We tooled around in it was like a rock and roll band, like a white beat up van, going all over the countryside of Japan, and we went to this little island called Noto, or peninsula, to go fishing. And so we're asking the guide, how many fish are we going to catch? They kept saying 4. Like, a long way to catch 4 fish. So we get there, and we get on these fishing boats, and it got lost in translation that it was 4 tons of fish, not 4 fish. And just our reactions to that, seeing all those fish being harvested and then having that for breakfast, wow, just amazing.
2 tons apiece. Well, that's very nice to hear. It's always cool when you admire somebody and they turn out to be the kind of person you want them to be, just like tonight. So, round of applause before we go to questions.
Okay, I want to know, like, what you ate when you came home from school, what your grandmother was putting up, what your mother was making for dinner in Appalachia.
Yes. Thank you for that question. There was always cornbread, was always biscuits, every single day. So there were 2 kinds of biscuits. My grandpa liked them really, really chewy, that's how I like them. And everyone else liked them really light and fluffy. And then there would be a thick cornbread and then a really thin one, which we call pone, P-O-N-E. Those were always there. And so those smells were always there. And those are the first things that I got to see, transform from a batter or a dough, cook in the oven, and then come out in these amazing aromas and flavors. But what we ate is a great example of how a lot of people eat in the South, and it was more than likely usually 95% vegetables, and sometimes seasoned with a little bit of meat. But we ate very little meat. We ate what was in the garden or what was in the basement. And the true craft and what I now realize is to make those things interesting each meal. We relied heavily on the pantry. And one of the unique things that really is one of my fondest memories in the way I now create food, even if it's a plate of food, is if we just had vegetables, let's say we just had soup beans and cornbread, there would be a table full of condiments, just like you see in Korean restaurants. There would be something sweet, something sour, something salty, something bitter, something really fresh and vibrant, something spicy, something sour. And you would use that to break up the monotony of a bowl of beans. But it taught me the different parts of my tongue at a very young age. And so now when I think of eating something, all that has to be activated. So that's how I teach all the cooks to create now. So it's like this complexity that just happens naturally. My grandma wasn't like, we're going to have something sweet, sour, salty, all these different components. It was just intuitive. The guy who kind of looks like me.
I should be so lucky. So your chef's table was very, I don't want to say, inspiring is fine, but I think a lot of cooks connected with it, especially around here with a young cook in the kitchen working really hard. It's kind of like scary, but not, and cool and fun. But watching you kind of physically deteriorate throughout, I think you kind of became a spokesman for cooks in general, like not working so crazy hard. But watching that made me kind of think to myself, if this guy could go back in time, what would he do differently to be as successful as you are right now? You know what I mean? And I don't want to sound combative with that, but it is a thought that I've had.
Well, the answer that my therapist would want me to say is nothing. Those things gave me the wisdom and the growth that I have today to be able to start this new restaurant with a whole new idea of how a restaurant can be operated so that we aren't miserable and we're not beating ourselves up. But if I could go back and change one thing, I would have learned the meaning of self-compassion a lot earlier than 40 years old.
Hi, I want to say thank you, first of all, because I think you're amazing, and
Thank you.
I literally have watched all your episodes of everything you've done millions of times, and I can't even cook. But I
Me
find
either.
you,
It's just the magic of television.
I can cook okra. It's like my big prideful thing. But I wanted to ask, because something I find really amazing is your passion and your seed saving, the things that you've talked about. I think it was Mind of a Chef, about when you met with Glenn Roberts, and I know he went out and found Carolina Gold Rice, and he's talked about, spreading the word on that, and how difficult that was, and how tedious, and how you have to be crazy to do it, you've said. How do you think that's going to go forward in the future, keeping some of these products that were lost after the Civil War that you're trying to revive and other people are trying to revive?
So the new restaurant, when you walk in the front door, the first thing you'll see is a floor-to-ceiling seed bank. I think it's so important to protect those things with, everything we have. Because if you ask the question, why the effort? Why go through all this trouble? Why spend all this money when we can create something similar in a laboratory somewhere? But these seeds, they carry multiple generations of wisdom, and that wisdom can't simply be tossed aside. And those seeds were selected naturally. They were selected because they were the most delicious. Those seeds were a part of that community because they are a source of just great communal pride. And you'll see as you start to go through, and if you go to these different websites where you can find heirloom seeds, you'll see a lot of them are named after families. A great example would be if you watch Chef's Table at the end, there's this bean called the wild goose bean that was my grandmother's favorite. And, seeing that on television, like seeing that with, I don't know how many people watch Netflix, but a lot, to see her name on that screen and to have so many people sending me messages trying to find that seed, those people are saying her name each time. That's just mind-blowing. So that bean, I nearly lost what I had. After her funeral, I went into her cabinet where there's all these pill bottles, prescription pill bottles, and there weren't pills in there. There were seeds in each of them. I don't know if she was hiding them or they were just convenient containers. But I became the steward of those seeds, and that responsibility taught me so much about food. But a couple years ago, the freezer that they were in got unplugged, and they all had to be thrown away. They all got ruined. But luckily, I'd passed out those seeds to people who are way better seedsmen than I am. And I think maybe a month and a half ago, one of those seedsmen brought me a huge bag of those beans from my grandmother. And I was able to take my son to see them growing before they were harvested. So he's going to have those pictures. That's absolutely incredible. But that trip, those beans ended up in the hands of someone who were taking them to the Icelandic Doomsday Seed Bank. Mind blown.
Thank you both for today. Thank you, Sean. I hope that you're an educator and a teacher to many of us. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
If you were allotted the joys of a rainy Sunday afternoon and were able to cook 3 meals for your family and friends, what records would you pair with the time you had in the kitchen preparing those meals?
You say what, records?
Yes. Thank you.
No pressure.
Oh, I love that. No, if you look at various art forms and you start to understand the similarities that they all share, they're there to make you feel a certain way. And I think that the best music and the best art and the best food comes from the older generations that weren't trained, who come about these things a natural way. It just kind of happens. And so I'm obsessed with North Mississippi blues. Junior Kimbrough, Arl Burnside, it's like no one taught, music theory to them. The music just came out of them. And it's a product of the rhythm of the railroad tracks and the rhythm of the cotton fields, and wow, just food is the same way, folk art is the same way, and so I think for me, that's what I like listening to. I like listening to music that came about the same way that comfort soul food came about.
It's a great Fat Possum Records shout out right there.
Mine's more just of a thank you. I really appreciate your honesty in regards to you getting sober. I know that addiction is something that is present in many of our lives, and I just wanted to say thank you for sharing that journey and being honest about it, and congratulations on your son.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
That just made my day. Thank you.
Super nervous.
Me too.
That response will feed right into what I'm going to ask. I humbly say this. Being a chef, I feel connected to you in a very, very small way. To respond to the woman's comment back there, I'm 6 months sober.
Wow, congratulations.
And seeing you do it before I did it, I feel like gave me strength in that sense. I wanted to ask, what does your ritual look like when you cook to create new ideas? Because mine involved bourbon, and now it doesn't. So I wish you could hear how fast my heart's beating. So I'm curious if you're willing to share, what does your ritual look like now as you create, and not with the absence of alcohol, but I'm sure it's more beautiful now, and I'm curious to know what that looks like in your personal, private sense to make public.
Well, now the cooking is true, authentic, honest courage, not liquid courage. That makes a big difference. So for me, the creative process is based around this theory that I created a long time ago and still wholeheartedly believe in. And I refer to it as the PIE theory, P-I-E, products, ideas, execution. And so the first step is to find those products, the products that are the best you can get your hands on, the best that you can afford, the products of your place. And then I'll hold that product in my hand, and so the idea phase is next, and I'll say, well, if I've seen it happen before, or if I've done it before, I can't do it again. So I push myself to think in that direction of trying to constantly create new techniques, new ideas. But then I think the most important part is the execution. And what sobriety and being clear-headed has taught me is the most important thing that I can do is to understand what my circle of competence is, what I can actually execute without being miserable. I can create something that's just absolutely insane, but if I try to cook that for 200 people, I'm gonna need to go to the bar and drink a bottle of whiskey, because it just, that knowledge and wisdom that I have now of having the courage to say, doesn't matter if I can do it. It's not a matter of like showing someone what I'm capable of. It's showing someone what I'm capable of doing while staying happy and healthy. And that's a restraint that took me a long time to understand.
So just out of curiosity, how many people who work in a kitchen are in the audience tonight? Oh, wow.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
How many
Community.
Southerners are in the house tonight? All right.
4.
All right. No, this is a Philly thing. This is your first time in Philly, you're saying, right?
This is my, well,
Yeah.
I've driven through once, but this is the first time I've spent more than,
No,
yeah.
none of us come to the godless north, apparently. Well, the rest of you, we won't hold it against you. All right, sir.
Hey, Sean. With your time in Charleston, I was curious about the dynamic of your relationship with other chefs, guys like Mike Latta, where you both kind of are friendly and you share a common goal in defining and perpetuating American cuisine, but also you're directly competing against each other in a really competitive food market. And a follow-up to that, tigers or gamecocks?
What was it?
Tigers or gamecocks?
So when I came to Charleston in 2006, I was 27 years old and scared to death. And I trained in Charleston during culinary school, and it was very competitive then. And to be in the ring as the chef of a restaurant in Charleston was just an insane amount of pressure. And I'm glad you mentioned Mike Latta, because there was a short period of time where we were so competitive towards each other. I mean, it didn't matter if it was cooking. Anything we were doing, we were competitive about it. But that actually ended up drawing us closer and made us really, really close friends. I think, in my opinion, I think Fig's one of the best restaurants to ever exist in the history of America. If you guys haven't been, you have to go. It's absolutely amazing. But it was competitive because we needed to fight for a small group of good cooks. But it was also really competitive because there was only a small handful of farmers producing great ingredients. And he was there before I was, and he got first right of refusal, which inspired me to start my own garden. And then I learned so much after that. So competition's good as long as you understand moderation.
When you were choosing the new location for the restaurant, why did you choose East Nashville as opposed to like the Gulch or 12 South? Was it anything in particular? Maybe closer to the Murder Kroger or Dino's? Or
What do you know about the Murder Kroger? That's awesome. I live right behind the Murder Kroger.
Yeah, I lived on Chickasaw, so yeah, I know the area.
I wanted a neighborhood or place that matched the vibe, that the level of energy that I wanted to work in. And this is, it's a simple neighborhood. I think there are 2 restaurants there now. And it's just a quiet, peaceful place. And I'm drawn to those things now.
So thank you, Chef, for coming here. And so I've heard you speak in podcasts. I've read things you said about, and a lot of people here that share your joy of community and sharing food. But you mentioned about like the values that you have for your restaurant, your core values. And with all the restaurants, like in Philadelphia, we have 6,000 restaurants, and it's a struggle to find people. You mentioned that. But how do you pass on your core values, and how do you get people to buy into that, both front of house and back of house?
So our training program is based largely around having the first week just focus on culture and values. And the second week, we focus on the product. And the third week, we practice those things. So in the new restaurant, I built, well, I didn't build it. I designed this room that its sole purpose is for educating the team on things that have nothing to do with food, on conflict resolution, on horizontal relationships and communication, on I'll have people come and speak about empathy. I'll have people come and speak about self-compassion, all the things that I've learned over the last couple years being in recovery that have helped me understand the value of taking care of myself first. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make in this industry is we deteriorate ourselves and bend over backwards and put ourselves through way too much because we think the guest wants a certain thing, when most of the time, most of it goes unnoticed. And so we are creating this idea that we want to start a restaurant from a blank piece of paper that focuses on us first, that completely focuses on the health and wellness and happiness of the team first. And it's the same theory that they talk about on the airplane when the masks drop. You put it on yourself first, which seems crazy. Wouldn't you want to help the person beside you? But the theory is you can't help someone else if you're not helping yourself. And so we're really taking this idea of community and trying to understand it from an internal perspective, meaning we will do our best to understand what our bandwidth is, what we're actually capable of doing. I've made the mistake so many times of trying to do too much and trying to help so many people and trying to say yes to every single charity that ever asks anything, and to say yes for, you do that because I was raised that way. But we're going to focus on ourselves and get a wellness program in place, and then we'll move out to the next layer of community, which is our neighborhood, and we'll focus on doing everything we can to contribute to the neighborhood. And then once we feel like we still have some bandwidth left and that we're still contributing to our team and to the restaurant, to the neighborhood, then we'll move to Appalachia, and we'll just see how that goes and take it slowly, and just do our best to wake up every day and try to make the next right decision.
Thanks for inventing McCradys. I was there exactly 30 days ago, just about. What I was thinking as we were going through this conversation, like, I live on my own and I have to make all my decisions. I had to get in the car, drive down there, and everything. And I arrived, and within an hour, I was at McCradys. And I didn't have to do a thing after that. And the level of service, I didn't have to make a decision about what I was going to eat. I had kind of cheated and maybe looked at the menu on the internet. But do you see that more as a level of service with restaurants rather than bringing out a menu, just bringing us out, like the food of that area? And I know I was overwhelmed at first, thinking 12 courses, yeah. But each one they come out and they'd say, what do you think? I'd be like, I don't know, can you bring it again? And I never felt full. It was just the most amazing experience to be treated in that way and have such wonderful food brought out. Just a completely unique experience from a restaurant. Do you see that kind of service growing in finer restaurants as something maybe not a trend, but something that could really go on and last? And will you have it in East Nashville?
Yes, it'll be in East Nashville. And I'm glad you experienced that, because my goal with that restaurant when I created it was I want the guests to feel as though they just left a spa appointment. I want you to feel relaxed and like a load has been taken off. And every decision that we made when creating that restaurant was based on reducing the level of stress for the guests. Every single decision we made. And so now I'm using that same theory, but I'm starting with the team. And every decision that we make as a team, whether it's menu format or which glassware we use, the first question that I ask is, what's the stress level and is it worth it? So I think if we can do both of those things, if we can have a happy and healthy team focused on creating an experience that reduces stress for the guests, that'll be our contribution to the world.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for speaking. I just want to say, I don't know how many like Netflix views you have or what your reviews are, if you give a crap about them. Someone mentioned Gamecocks versus Clemson. Ironically, I went to South Carolina to study something not food related. I ended up leaving, redirecting my path. I came up here to do food. A friend of mine, he went on to Clemson. It wasn't until I shared with him that I watched your Mind of a Chef episodes and such. This person is currently finishing their senior research product at Clemson. So I don't know about, again, reviews or whatever, but if you want numbers, Sean, you inspired this one person to do a senior research project with your work with Glenn Roberts to study over 100 varieties of tomatoes and okra. So I thank you for that, and I'm sure he thanks you for that. And I want you to know your work hasn't gone unnoticed. The one question I have, I've been directed as a young cook, I'm 24, to be a sponge. You redirected in your career. I've eaten at McCradys, I've sent people to Husk to eat, and whenever you decided to, I noticed, you decided it's time to redirect. Whether I'm 24, whether in your 30s, whether you're in cooking or not, what piece of information would you, share with us as far as redirecting other than self-compassion?
Well, I'd like to hire that person that you were just talking about. So if you could have them go to workwithseanbrock@gmail.com, that would be awesome. I read a book a year and a half ago that changed the way I see the world. And it's a book based around the theories of Alfred Adler, and he was around with Carl Jung and Freud. And his theories are so simple that no one paid much attention to them. And his whole thing is worth is defined by finding something that you love and something that you feel like you're a part of or a place that you belong to, and then contributing to it. He says that's all you need. That's the only worth you'll ever need. And so when I feel like I'm not contributing to something, then something's got to change. But if I can go to bed, each night knowing that I did my best to contribute to something that I love, that's all I'll ever need. And that has guided me to make so many more rational decisions, and it's helped me realize how simple life really is and how complicated I made it for myself for so long. Realize that we are all, every single one of us, are doing the very best that we can with the tools we have each day. And if I know that I did my best each day, that's it. That's all I need.
Can you guys think of a better way to end? I can. Sean Brock.